Welcome back to Open Heart Conversations, where we come together as community to explore the world's enduring spiritual and religious traditions. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Jose Miguel Roman, and with me is our executive producer, Renee Rossi. Welcome back, Reverend Renee.
Good morning, Jose. So good to see you again.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you. We have a very special program today. Coming to us all the way from England is Reverend Ingrid Scott, one of my dearest friends, a person of extraordinary spiritual wisdom. Reverend, I could talk about Reverend Scott forever. I really believe there should be books and movies about this extraordinary soul. She is a very, very, very successful businesswoman who recently closed down her business of over 30 years in England. She had a fiber optics company that was very successful. She then, at one point, had a store that specialized in works associated with angels. She has a very, very, very active ministry in England that is in many ways global. And she also has a very active charity that has been recognized by the highest leadership in England for its work, not only in England, but throughout the world. And she has come to us today to talk to us about service and how service can in many ways be a journey to wholeness. Reverend Ingrid, beloved friend and spiritual soul, welcome back to Open Heart Conversations.
Good morning, my beloved. Good to be back.
I'm going to start this by asking you what may be actually sound like a simple question, but may prove to be actually a rather difficult one. How would you define service?
I personally think of service as a commitment to helping our fellow man. It's a requirement for myself that I feel helps complete me as a human being. We're not in this world as insular, isolated little beings. We are part of a community, whether it's local, national, or international. When we talk about oneness, it's not seeing separation because of location. It's seeing unification because we share the same essence, the same energy, the same life force. So service is an opportunity to be a vessel, a conduit through which that infinite intelligence, that divine, flows through you to help another soul or souls. So service to me is a way of expressing the divine in connecting with my fellow travelers on this planet.
What would you say, Reverend Ingrid, is the most important thing you would want someone to know or remember about service?
That it's something that blesses you as much as the recipient. It's not just doing good works for the sake of it or for feeling that you've done something for someone. What it actually does to you on so many levels, physiological, emotional, mental, spiritual, is as much a blessing to you as it is to them. So I think when you step into the role of doing service, you get more than you give.
I love that you described it that way, because I really am hoping you can take us through all the benefits. We, of course, won't have time for every benefit of an act of service, but how it affects each party involved, sort of from micro to macro. Like there's the recipient, there's the person doing the act of service, and then there's the community and the collective. So what kind of effects happen when an act of service is done?
Well, anything that we do for one person will ripple out to touch others. And so, no act of kindness or good deeds is ever just insular, because, okay, you might do something for your next door neighbor that has an effect that she's or he is so touched by it, it then inspires them to do something. And then you can have that knock-on effect. So when we do service, we think it's just this one person, or we might feel it's just this one person, but we don't know how it can connect to the next person. You know, people are very familiar with the term pay it forward. You don't know what your one action, how that might in turn be paid forward exponentially. So yeah, we're never just doing something and it's just isolated. We never see the end result of how it could manifest in touching other people. Even something as simple as taking time to acknowledge someone you're passing on the street, to smile at them. That might change their whole attitude or demeanor. That could then have them going from feeling in a huff or whatever to them going into the office and being so much more nicer to everybody. And I think it's always important to understand that service isn't necessarily, giving money or time. It could be a small gesture, smiling or saying good morning, that can make all the difference to another person, another human being. And, and when we talk about being wired for connection, it's this simple interaction as one human to another that can shape and shift how we are and how we show up, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like, that service and maybe kindness, they could be interchangeable when you describe it in that way.
Oh, absolutely. I think people can get bogged down with language and terminology, that they lose the gist of what it's about. Services, for me, is about kindness and it's about compassion. And I think you can interchange it with either of those words, or empathy even, because when you show up as or you do a kindness, or you do a good deed, or you take time to be empathetic to someone and listen to what they're going through, it all adds up to the same thing. It's showing you care. It's showing that they matter. It's showing that you're concerned. It's showing that you want to help. So yes, we can interchange those words. And I always feel that it's important that we don't allow language to stop us or defer us from doing things because we think it's too religious or it's too out there. Be a kind person. I often say to people, I'm not interested in religion or theology. I'm interested in, are you showing up as a kind and decent human being? And that's all that matters. And, when we talk about service, it's again, are you showing up as the best that you can be in being kind to someone, as well as being kind to yourself?
Renee, can I tease this out a little bit? Because I think this is so important. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Because I think this is really, really, really powerful, because you're speaking in a way that suggests almost like a trinity of gifts that comes out of service. The first gift is the person who's the receiver in many ways. That person gets the benefit of something that is life-affirming to them. And it could be something as simple as a smile or an act of kindness. And it's life-affirming to them. The person that's giving is also, it seems to be, an incredible beneficiary. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Reverend Ingrid, but part of the benefit is that we kind of lose this obsession with me, mine, and I. That in service, you really do transcend in many ways this egoic self-obsession. You give of yourself and expand yourself in that fashion. And then the third piece is, as you said, that there is almost a karmic energy to service. And that goodness really does have ripple effects in the world in ways that you can't even see it. Am I listening and hearing what you're saying, Dr. Ingrid, or is there something here that I'm missing?
No, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. We are moving from me to we, from that self-centered I, the little I, where we feel that the world rotates around us and owes us, to recognizing we are not just the I or the one, we are all. And I feel that's significant because if you look at all of the saints or sages or the spiritual teachers and masters, avatars, whatever you want to call them, that have been before, everything that they practiced, everything they demonstrated was inclusivity. In terms, it was never just about their world and what they wanted. It was always, what could they do for others? And how they could help bring others along so that they too learned how to do and how to give and how to share. And so when we can move from the me to the we, when we can move from the it's just about what I want, what I need, to what do we all need? And we all need the same thing. I mean, how could you not feel compassion when several weeks ago there was earthquake in Turkey and Syria? How could you not feel for your fellow human beings who in the middle of the night literally had their world tumbling down on top of them? How could you not want to do something, no matter how small, to help alleviate the pain or the distress or the whatever? You know, you cannot hear and know what's going on with the world without feeling touched by it.
So in some ways, then you're saying service also, as you engage in service, you really open your heart.
Absolutely. You cannot remain closed off or insular or shut down to the world and all that's happening in it. Yes, some people are. There's no doubt about that. But for me, on a personal level, I cannot hear or see or read or come across something and not be touched or moved, or not even feel what would it be like if I was in that situation, if I was in that condition, if I was in that place. I get very hurt and distressed when in this country at this moment, at this time, we have a bill that's being pushed through to make it very difficult and challenging for people who are seeking asylum or refugee status. And my thing is always, if that was me seeking asylum, seeking refuge from being bombed, being hauled in to fight a war that I didn't believe in, or whatever the need or want, I would want a country to be open and willing to take me in, and willing to help me escape the atrocities or the violence I've seen or been a part of. And I cannot understand or fathom how it is challenging or difficult for other people to feel that way or to think that way. And it is, I feel, important that we keep striving to remember our humanity, and that what connects us and what unifies us is our shared humanity, our shared oneness. So, yes, my thing is always, let's keep pushing, moving from the me to the we. And that's how we're going to make this world a better place. You know, it isn't going to happen on its own. We have to work at it. Someone
right now who's watching or listening to this program may be asking how they can explore how to serve. So what would be your recommendations?
I don't wish to sound trite or flip, but Google. You know, you can Google, because this probably is going out and it will go to not only the States, but around the world as well. Every country will have organizations that require help, assistance, whether it's volunteering physically, whether it's writing to perhaps people in the armed forces, whether it's visiting those in care homes, the elderly, whether it's creating care packages for children. Really, Google, and you'll come up with, you know, if you Google, how can I help? How can I volunteer? How can I be of service? There will be so much coming up. There are so many organizations out there that need help, that need assistance. And when I talk about being of service, it isn't necessarily monetary all the time. It could be your time you give. It could be, you know, just taking them to email, to write a card, to pop next door, check in the elderly if she's okay or he's okay. But there's so much information available on the internet now. It is one of the better things about the internet is that it can be used to help, to inform, to educate people as to what they can do in order to be of service, in order to be a vessel.
That leads me to my next question, Reverend Ingrid. So knowing all of this and your experience with service and how you so beautifully described it as going from the me to the we and all the ways we can help one another, would you consider service a spiritual practice?
No, it doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. I think, again, as I started out saying, I'm very concerned that language doesn't put people off. And if you're going to suddenly associate service with spiritual work or spirituality or spiritual practice, that could put some people off. And it could be if you wanted to direct yourself in that way. But as I said before, it really is just showing up as a decent human being. That doesn't need to be spiritual. That doesn't need to be religious. That just requires that you think, what can I do to make this world a better place? And what's my part in it? And that doesn't need spirituality or religion at all. By all means, if you want to make it as part of your spiritual practice, that daily, what have I done for something else? You can do that, but it's not exclusive. And I think it's very important that, we don't make these things about spirituality or about religion. They're irrelevant, really. You are not keeping score, keeping count when you're doing service. You're just simply doing it. So to do it, say, as a spiritual practice, and in many philosophies and religions, they include it. And so people might want to see it that way, but it's not a necessity in my viewpoint.
I love that. It's for everyone. It's here for everyone, no matter how you connect to God or not, or the divine. And yet, service is a big part of a lot of, the world's religions and faiths. And I'm wondering if you can even speak to that as well, like some of the examples where, people do make it very spiritual.
Oh, in all of the major traditions, they have some reflection or aspect about service. In Islam, one of the 5 pillars is that they have to do charity. As also within Sikhism, they have to do charity. And you're familiar with the Sikhs' kitchens where they cook with the big pots and everything to feed the local communities. Within Hinduism, they're one of the yogas is about service. Judaism, from tithing to Maneshwar, can't even say that, where it's about service and doing charity and doing good deeds. And certainly although I'm not a Christian, I am a lover of Jesus. Jesus said, if you want to be great, go and serve. That was simple. He didn't limit it. He didn't put any clauses on it. Just said, go and serve, and his final commandments, which was love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. So all of the traditions, and in Buddhism too, it's about service. So you can look at all of the major world traditions and they're all speaking to being of service, being compassionate, being kind. And you could ignore all the world traditions and just show up as a decent human being and be kind, So yes, it's there from the saints and sages from past, but we don't even need to look at them to say we need to be caring. We need to be concerned. Because I feel, you would want, God forbid you were ever in a reverse role situation, that someone would care about you, that someone would want to show up for you, someone would want to go to bat for you, someone would think that you were worth caring for. And that's not about religion, that's just humanity.
Reverend Dr. Ingrid Scott, how is service related to our humanity?
How is it not? How is it not? Every single human being on this planet wants the same thing. They want food and shelter. They want to be cared for. They want to be able to be educated. And if you want that for yourself, how can you not want it for the next person? How can you feel that your needs is somehow superior to their needs? How can you feel that they are somehow less than or inferior to? So for me, how can we separate our compassion, our service, our caring from just being a human being? Isn't that what makes us slightly elevated from the rest of the animal kingdom? I say slightly because it can be debatable at times, but this is what elevates us, because we have this conscious awareness, and we are, one of Darwin's theories was that we are wired for connection. It's this wiring for connection that, for me, makes you feel that compassion for another human being, that makes you want to alleviate their suffering, their pain, their whatever it is, within the realms of what you're capable and able to.
It's really interesting that you said Darwin. The survival of the fittest has been come to almost be interpreted in Nietzschean terms, right? It's that person who's willing to go out there and do battle and destroy whoever he or she needs to destroy, that actually survives and prospers and moves forward. And that's been our understanding of Darwin's theory. Recent research, and I'm speaking now as someone who is deeply, deeply grounded in science. All of the recent science suggests that is a gross misunderstanding of the way humanity not only survived but prospered. We're now talking about the altruistic gene. The reality is that what allowed our species to survive and thrive was that there was an element in us that allowed us to work together and to even sacrifice for each other, that allowed our species to be the dominant species. It wasn't this, survival of the fittest, the big strong man or strong woman. It really was actually the capacity of us to come together in a communal sense and work together and literally sacrifice for each other that allowed our species to survive and thrive and prosper on this planet. A radical reinterpretation. It's fascinating because it speaks to what you're speaking to, which is that makes service integral to our humanity, integral to our survival. I totally agree with you. Completely agree with you. Science is agreeing with you.
Absolutely. And the thing with how that distortion came about, or the fact that it came about, well, there were those in that period that felt it was only the strong and the dog-eat-dog that would survive. But what Darwin was saying was actually contrary to that. That's a part of it. But what he recognized was it was, as you spoke to, our connection, our working together, our collaborations, our supporting one another that helped us to grow. But, given the times that it was in, that was not really acceptable, because humanity was bursting out and forth and wanted to achieve and conquer and all of these things. So it kind of used that as the excuse for how it proceeded in its colonizations, etc., etc. But yes, connection, and that we are stronger together than we are in the separate individual parts, is what's important.
Reverend Dr. Ingrid Scott, you and I've talked a little bit about this in the past, and that is you go out there and you do your research, and you could easily be overwhelmed, especially during this time that we are all living in. There is so much that can be done in our communities, in our own lives, politically, economically, socially, culturally, spiritually, religiously, in every area of our life. We see so much need, so much suffering, that it can overwhelm us. It can, and that overwhelming, that sense of overwhelmingness can in many ways lead us to kind of stay in our home and not want to get involved. So how can we shift that perspective? How can we prevent ourselves from being paralyzed by the overwhelming need that exists in our planet at this time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I remember one day as I was working in my charity, I'd received about 4 or 5 different grants from various places in Africa, each very worthwhile in supporting the projects were. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, there is so much need in this world. Even if I gave my lifeblood, it still wouldn't be enough. And as I sat there feeling the sense of what the hell can I do, there was this awareness, let me put it like that. You can do something. I can't do it all, but I could do something. And it was very easy for us to think, because there's so much, because it's too much, because it's so overwhelming, I won't do anything. But the fact that sometimes it's the smallest deed, the smallest gift that can make the difference. And I know you are aware of that story of the little boy walking along the beach with all the starfish that had been washed up, throwing each starfish back into the sea. And when an adult said, why are you doing that? You can't save them all. And he was like, well, I saved that one and it mattered to him. We can't save everyone and we can't fix everything. But what we can do, wherever it is, whether it's within the family, whether it's within the neighborhood, whether it's within the country, whether it's globally, we can do something. So it's not to just look and say, it's too much, therefore I won't do anything. It's to say, what can I do? And let me do that in whatever shape or way or form. And I think it's always important not to judge about how much you think you're doing or how little you think you're doing. I think it's important that you do something. And I'm trying to remember who said it about leaving the world a little bit better because you've lived, whether it be a small patch or a child or something. What would be ultimately your legacy? And it doesn't mean that anybody else is going to know what your legacy is. And it's not, for me personally, that's not the important part, people knowing what I've done. The important part is that I've done something. So don't get overwhelmed. Don't be daunted, but just say, what is mine to do? Let me do it. And it could be just picking up litter on the street. Again, it's no big or small. It's this recognition. I can do this. This is right. This is right before me. I can do. Someone's left this letter. Let me just pick it up. It's simple things we can do. And recognizing, if each of us do something small, if each of us makes the effort, it will make the difference in the long run. It will make the difference in the long run.
That reminds me of a recent news program in England that talked about King Charles. His Majesty recently gave money to I believe, what we in America call a soup kitchen. And the news program came out and it was showing that program. And Ingrid, it touched my heart so deeply that as they're showing the kitchen, there you are. And I need to say this because our hearers and our viewers need to know this. Quite frankly, in America, you would be referred to as one of the 1%. You are a person who sacrificed and worked very hard and became and are, in fact, an incredibly successful human being. You can live a life of splendor for the next 30 years and worry about no one and nothing. And yet here you were in that kitchen, literally with a massive pot cooking. And it occurred to me, I know the level of economic dislocation that's being suffered right now in Great Britain. It's significant. It's almost overwhelming. You were not that day able to cook for the entire country's needs, but you were cooking for someone. There you were cooking for someone. There must have been people that day that had food on their table because you, Reverend Ingrid Scott, worked on that pot, which really brings me to that next point, which is, it's almost silly to ask, but needs to be asked, can one person make a difference? And what is the difference that a person can make? What is the difference that you, one human being, very privileged person, what was it that at that moment you were feeling, this is the difference I can make by being here and cooking?
It's not just the difference of what one person can make. It's the difference when one person plus one person plus one person plus one person comes together to work towards a common good or a common goal. I originally was only going to go to this kitchen maybe once or twice a month because I volunteer elsewhere. And on a particular day when I'd gone, and the first time I was actually in the kitchen, and we had packed up 3,000 meals, what struck me was that was 3,000 people that needed this food. 3,000 people, and again, I own it. I'm very privileged. I could pick and choose about what I want to eat from what I don't want to eat. And some of the food, obviously, the kitchen, it gets the food before it gets thrown away. So they're limited as to what they can do from what they received as donations, is what they can cook and make meals. And one of the meals was sausages, Brussels sprouts, and potatoes. And I remember thinking, oh my God, who'd want to eat Brussels sprouts with sausages? And then the realization, when you're hungry, you'll eat anything. And to say, thank you, Lord, that I have that choice, that I'm not forced to eat Brussels sprouts. But it struck me that there was such a huge need. I needed to come and volunteer every week. So I made that conscious decision to drive. And it can be up to 2 hours to drive each way to get there. But the idea, when I see other people volunteering as well, the recognition, yes, there are good people in this world. Yes, we can come together to make a difference. And yes, people do care. And I think that's the rewarding thing. You know that there are other people that care about people. It's not just, the people they have people that are paid employees, and then they have volunteers, but they're all there because they care about other people. And so I feel it's never just one person. It's one person that will tell another person, and they come together to make the difference, to make the change, to help, to touch another individual. So, I feel that, again, it's important to just know that you can be of service somewhere. You can show up and do something for someone that can make the difference between having and not having to another human being.
Reverend Ingrid, hearing your story about the soup kitchen and talking about, when you were able to go and how long you had to travel, I'm just curious about the question of frequency when it comes to service. Can you speak to some people can serve every day, and some people maybe feel like they can't, or is there no difference? Could you speak to that? There is a need every day for us to serve, and how we can show up and serve in different capacities, I guess is my question.
Not everybody can do something every day. I think there's a difference between being conscious about, have I done something good for someone, be it pick up the phone and call your grandmother or whatever, or, making coffee in the office for your fellow colleagues. Yes, there's little things we can do on a daily basis, but I don't think it's the be all and end all. Well, I haven't done anything good for anybody, therefore I'm somehow undeserving of whatever. I feel there needs to just be a consciousness of, have I done something? And if you have, all well and good. And if you haven't, well, then you'll try harder the next day. And it could be, I think when I talk about developing a consciousness, it's a case of recognizing how your actions are in the world. So you don't necessarily have to go out of your way. You could be in the supermarket and let someone go in front of you. You could be in the supermarket and help someone with their trolley or unload their goods or whatever. There isn't, oh, well, I've got to get my quota in. It's just, I think, being conscious of, have I done something for somebody else this day? And just being cognizant of, yes, no, okay, I'll do better tomorrow or whatever. But there isn't, and there shouldn't be, I don't feel, somehow this mandatorium that you have to do it. No, you'll do it if it feels and comes from the heart. And I'm a great believer that if it's not coming from the heart, it's best you don't do it. If you're doing it grudgingly, or you feel that you've got to do this because you haven't, no, stop. It's not a blessing to the person, and it definitely won't be a blessing to you. So do it with a good heart and a willing heart. And if you're not feeling it, don't do it. Don't do it. Do it when you do feel in the space that, oh, I'd like to do something kind. But for me personally, I think if you're developing a consciousness of kindness, it's not a big whoop. Either way, it will come naturally to you. You'll automatically do it. You don't have to think about doing, because it becomes part instinctively of your nature. So no, do as and when, but don't feel guilty, and don't do it if it's not genuine.
Good advice. Yes. And that also, makes me think about, doing it from your heart. And, if you find that, you had to work late one night or whatever it was, life's responsibilities, this sort of like knowing that you can trust that, maybe the day I wasn't able to fully show up, somebody else was. Somebody else was that one person today.
Absolutely. There is in the universe this, I always say the divine mind, everything and everyone is in the divine mind, which knows what you have need of wherever it is. And so you may not be able to show up, but it doesn't mean it hasn't touched somebody else's heart to show up and do what's needed. And that's, for me, is the importance why you don't waste time with guilt and shame and all of that stuff. But just know, okay, I'll do what I can. And it's this thing again. If you're aware of showing up to being the best you can be, some days you'll excel and some days it won't be so great, and that's cool. That's part of the human experience. But it's to be cognizant and conscious of it that starts to shape and shift things.
So can you speak about, being conscious and being aware of, maybe what day it is? Is this the day I'm excelling? Is this the day I'm maybe not quite excelling, and knowing that it changes, sometimes moment to moment. What role would you say that boundaries play when it comes to service?
Boundaries.
Or do they not play a role?
But that's not a word I like to use for anything, because I'm not sure that in the world of service or giving that you limit yourself. And let me just elaborate on that. Jesus did not say, go out and serve and do the work in the world. However, you should only do X, Y, and Z, or you should only do or show up in this way or manner. He did show that when he was doing the work and he was exhausted, he took himself away. Now, to me, that's just self-care. And I believe in anything that we're doing, we do need to practice self-care and not go to burnout. Now, you might want to call that boundary setting, but that's not my language. But it is to be cognizant of what you can and cannot do, physically, mentally, emotionally. I was so overwhelmed with the need at the kitchen, I wanted to do twice a week. But physically, this driving backwards and forwards, I realized I couldn't. And so I decided to do a double shift. Now, I leave home at 11 in the morning, and sometimes I get home just before 9 at night. That's a long day, but I know that's what I can do. And then I have the next day to recuperate. And so I think it's important, and it's language. Don't burn yourself out in whatever it is you choose to do or whatever you're doing, but recognize when you can do and when you can't. And be okay with that. Be okay with that. Does that answer that boundary question?
Yes, it does. And I thank you. I love that we're deconstructing the language and the words and, all throughout the conversation yes.
Well, you know what? I feel sometimes language can inhibit and put people off things simply because they see it as this one thing. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be. I say to people, if you're not comfortable with the word God, that's okay. We can leave that word out. If it's triggering you, we can use the word love. We can use the universe. We can use divine intelligence, whatever. It's, don't let language inhibit you. And I think that's why it was important for me to say that service is not connected to religion or spirituality. It's simply showing up as a decent human being.
Reverend Ingrid, there'll be folks that are seeing this program, listening to the program, who conclude, I really would like to integrate service into my life. This is something that most probably would be a wonderful way of expressing who I am in the world and what I want in the world. So how can someone begin the process of integrating service into their lives?
Start off small. Again, let's drop the word service and just say, how am I showing up as a decent human being? So how are you showing up as a decent human being towards your family? Some people are very distant from their family or don't give them the time of day. Maybe that's the first place to start. How are you showing up in your office or your workplace? That could be the next place you start. How are you showing up in your community? What's needed in my community? Is there volunteers needed maybe at the local community garden or farm shop or whatever? Look and start small and expand. And as I said, and I wasn't being flip, when you Google what is my need in my community, where can I volunteer in my community, you'll see a deluge of places and organizations that need help, assistance, time. We talk about giving of our time, our time, talent, or treasure. Everybody has something to give. And I always feel it's important to emphasize when we're talking about service, it's not about money necessarily. Yes, all organizations need money, but they also need help. And if you can give of your time or if you have a talent that you can share, then that's the way to begin. And don't get overwhelmed and don't get put off. Just, like he says, just do it. Just do it.
Reverend Ingrid, why are you interested in this? I guess this is a rather personal question. Like, why does it matter to you to show up as a kind, compassionate, decent human being?
Very, very many years ago, I saw a film with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep called Defending Your Life. And I so resonated with it. And in this film, there was the idea that when you died, you had to go and kind of give account for yourself, for what you did on your time on earth. And it so resonated and struck a chord with me that I always thought, if I had to give account for myself, and God asked me, what did you do with everything I blessed you with? And I'm just like, well, I had a good time and I lunched and I partied. that wouldn't be the right answer. And I felt then, and as I still feel now, that what matters is not just what I can do for myself, but what else can I do for others? How have I made a difference with what I've been blessed with? It's what people, I think, fail to understand is that when you are blessed with whatever it is, be it finances or your talents, it's to be shared. It isn't just to be hoarded. It's like, well, it's mine and that's it. It's to be shared and it's to be circulated. And I've always said that if you want to ask me what one of the secrets are for success, it's knowing how to give. And when you know how to give, be it time, talent, or treasure, you're opening yourself back up to receive more, because nature hates a vacuum. So once you've given of yourself, you are replenished again. So for me, giving is important, because what I'm blessed with isn't mine to hold and keep for myself, but it is to be shared and circulated. And B, as I do so, I'm replenished. So it's a win-win situation. So I want to be able, when I die, if that's the case, and I have to give account of myself, I can say, I tried. I did my best. I tried.
Reverend Ingrid, a lot of folks are listening to us and seeing this program, and they're really, they feel they've learned something, they've gotten something of deep value through it, and would love to be able to explore more of your work. So my next question is, how can someone learn a lot more about your offerings?
Well, you can go on my website, loveiskindness.org. And you'll see about my charities and where I've worked all over the world, and really what motivates me, what inspires me, what keeps me going, what keeps me doing. I have stopped thinking or feeling I haven't done enough, because it's very easy to think, oh, well, I can't do this and I can't do that because I should. And it's like, no. You know, you keep doing what you can, and as and when you can do more, then you will do more. And I think that's important for anybody on this pathway, to accept and acknowledge that there's always more to do, but do what's in front of you at this time, and don't allow overwhelm to take hold.
And now I'll just call you Ingy, because you've been my Ingy for such a long time.
Yes,
and is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to say that you'd love to be able to share with us as we close this program?
I think I've said most of whatever I'd want to say. I think the only thing I'd like to emphasize is, number one, don't let religion or theology stop you from doing anything. And don't feel that you're just one person, therefore, if you don't do anything, it doesn't matter, because it does. And don't allow what you think it's too small or it's too big to stop you. Because people sometimes don't begin something or don't do something because they think it's too much, or they won't begin or do something because they think it's too little. It's irrelevant. Just do something. That's important. And know that if you can't do it from your heart, don't do it. Don't do it. When you can do it from your heart, go for it. And I think that's about it, is what I would like to just conclude with.
As we close this program, I'd like to acknowledge something that you said, which is how service really in many ways begins at home, right? I mean, what's the use of going out to try to feed the world if you haven't fed your own loved ones with love and with kindness? And so I'd like to close first by thanking you, Ingrid, because your unconditional, non-judgmental love has always been a sanctuary for me. It has always been a sanctuary for me, and I'm so grateful to you. Renee, you are your whole life is a life of service. You've kept this program, Open Heart Conversations, up and running. No one else has done that. Not me, not anyone else. And when I have had the need to when I've had the need to go to spirit, I've come to you, and you've always been a voice of spirit in my life. So thank you for the service you've provided me, and the love you've provided me. Two beautiful souls. I am so rich. So thank you both. And to all our viewers and all our listeners, thank you for sharing your time, your energy, your voice, your moment with us. That is a service you provide us as you give us an opportunity to go around the world, meet with people like Reverend Dr. Ingrid Scott, and explore these beautiful topics. So thank you for being part of our community. And to all of you, we wish you the very, very best until the next Open Heart Conversations.